in the UK, of course, I'm sure you're aware of this, you know, there's a common myth that goes around, a common misconception, which is, you know, did Jesus even exist? And people actually doubt the historical Jesus. Now, as an evangelist and as an apologist, how would you respond to that critique that Jesus doesn't exist?
Well, Paul, wow, that's a great question. It baffles me when people raise that question. In this day and age, this should not be a thing, right? We should not be facing people questioning that at all. Maybe we can talk about this for the rest of this recording. I think we can be here for a long time. The number of times I hear someone say, you don't even know if Jesus really existed. Yeah. Now, that's really strange, because if we can't have very good reasons for the existence of Jesus using all the thousands of documents we have about Jesus, you can't be sure about any of the other characters that ever exist, historic characters that ever existed in history, right? We have more documents about Jesus, the life and death and resurrection, than we have about any other person ever who's ever existed. I would really love to go in a bit of detail here, but the kind of general thing that people can remember, which is not difficult to remember, that you can share with people, you can say, look, using just the Bible manuscripts alone, we have over 5,800 completed and fragmented Greek manuscripts. So you can actually use the manuscripts as your evidence that certainly the character of Jesus existed historically. We have about 10,000 Latin manuscripts. We have over 9,300 manuscripts in ancient language and Syria, Slavic, Gothic, Coptic, Ethiopic, and Armenian manuscripts, right? We're talking about 25,000 manuscripts, and they're still finding more, right? So some Bible manuscripts were found that goes back as early as the 2nd century, like the famous papyrus P52. I guess you don't have to remember all the details, but we have details, right? And it's crazy. It's crazy to doubt the existence of Jesus based on these manuscripts alone. And can you imagine if somebody wanted to invent something like this? Oh boy, with all these manuscripts, it's going to be difficult. I mean, we haven't even talked about the codices, right? The Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, and so on, and plenty more, right? We've got them all. And we haven't spoken about historians who actually speak about Jesus, or people like Josephus, Tacitus, and so on. And trust me, if we have more time, I would love to get into this. But we don't doubt other people's historic characters. Like, we don't doubt Caesar's Gallic War, who's written in the 1st century BC, and then the earliest copy we have for this one is about 1,000 years later than the event, and we only have about 10 copies, and no one doubts about that. No one doubts about these, the existence of Caesar or the Gallic War, the historic event. The Tacitus writings, which is in the 2nd century AD, and the earliest copy we have is about 1,000 years later with only 20 copies. Nobody doubts those copies. But when it comes to our copies, even though we have more copies, I mean, we're spoiled with copies. They go around doubting. It just doesn't make sense. I could be more specific. Bart Ehrman, for example, who's, I don't know if you know Bart Ehrman. Do you know Bart Ehrman? Yeah. He's not a Christian, right? He openly declares that he's not a Christian, but wrote a book specially about did Jesus exist? Did you know that? The historic argument for Jesus of Nazareth. And in his book, he completely destroys the argument that Jesus didn't exist, right? That some mythicists come up with. He's done debates on the subject on Premier Christian Radio. You've probably seen that, called Unbelievable. So even historians, right, even those who are not Christians, completely understand that it is impossible. I mean, we got quotes from people who say, look, the one indisputable fact is whether Jesus existed, right? That is something no one doubts. And if somebody wants to go that far, they're basically laughing at the face of every possible evidence we have, right? Sure. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, we can talk about this for much longer. I could be very much more specific, but when you're sharing your faith with people and this comes up, you can throw in just some of those manuscripts. Say, well, if you're going to doubt the existence of Jesus, you can doubt just about every historic character we ever had in the past, because that's what you're basically saying. We have more evidence for Jesus, and yet you're rejecting it. It's not a good basis for a conversation. It just shows how little you've investigated or know about the subject, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. If it comes to any other historical figure, nobody doubts it. But the moment you mention Jesus, suddenly it's like, let's doubt everything to do with Jesus.